If you're looking at a Northern Europe cruise, it's very easy to assume these are some of the simplest itineraries you can do. You're visiting major European cities. The distances look manageable on the map, and it feels like you can just walk off the ship and explore. But once you actually start looking at how these ports work in practice, that's where the differences start to show. Because some ports are genuinely easy walk-off days. Others are really gateway ports dressed up as the destination, and a few can completely change what you can realistically do once you're there if you don't understand them in advance. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through 10 things you need to know before you book. One of the biggest things to understand with a Northern Europe cruise is that the ports are not all easy in the same way. In reality, the experience can change completely from one port to the next. Hamburg and Rotterdam are the obvious examples of ports that feel easy almost the second you step off the ship. You are already close to the city, public transport is nearby, and the day can begin straight away. There is very little friction between leaving the ship and actually doing something. Then you get to somewhere like Zeebrugge, and the rhythm of the day is completely different. You are in a working port, you cannot just walk out, and before you have even really started exploring, you are already thinking about shuttles, onward transport, timings, and how the return journey is going to work. This is probably the biggest thing that changes how Northern Europe cruise ports feel in practice. Some ports are true city stops, others are just the access point to somewhere else, and the place in the itinerary title is not really where your day begins. Le Havre is the clearest example. It is often sold as Le Havre for Paris, and technically that is true, but Paris is a long way from the port. Once you factor in getting off the ship, boarding transport, the journey itself, and then doing the same in reverse later in the day, Paris becomes a very structured trip, rather than a normal port stop. That changes the entire feel of the day. For some people, that is still worth it, especially if Paris is somewhere they really want to see. But it is very different to the kind of day many people picture when they first book the cruise. When you do get a proper city center port on a Northern Europe cruise, it makes a bigger difference than people often realize. It is not just convenient, it changes the entire structure of the day. Hamburg is a very good example of this. Docking in Havre City means you are not starting the day with a transfer or a coach ride or a search for a station. You step off the ship, and you are already in a modern, useful part of the city. Shops, cafes, transport, and major sites are all within easy reach. That means you can start simple. You can walk, you can stop, you can change direction, you can decide on the day what kind of port stop you want it to be. Rotterdam gives you that same kind of freedom. You are right by the river, close to the Erasmus Bridge, and the city is effectively there as soon as you leave the terminal. In most Northern Europe ports, the answer is yes. And this is one of the reasons these itineraries appeal to people who like doing their own thing. Public transport is generally good. City layouts are usually easier to understand than people expect. And many of the main sites are already connected by metro, train, tram, or ferry. Take Rotterdam as an example. Going to Amsterdam independently is absolutely doable. The route is straightforward. Metro to the main station, train to Amsterdam, then walk or local transport once you arrive. None of that is difficult, but it is still a multi-stage journey. And that means every small delay matters more than people expect. Waiting for the metro, finding the right platform, buying tickets, allowing for the return. None of those things are dramatic, but they all take time. If you're planning to go to Amsterdam from Rotterdam, I've done a full step-by-step guide from the cruise port. The link to that video is in the description. Another thing that makes some Northern Europe cruises work better than people expect is the length of the port days. On some itineraries, particularly with MSC, late departures are common in places like Hamburg, Rotterdam, and Le Havre, and that changes a lot. A normal 5 o'clock departure creates a very specific kind of cruise port day. You are aware all the time that you need to work backwards. Lunch cannot be too late. One wrong delay can make the afternoon feel compressed, and even if the destination is easy, the day often has a built-in limit. A later departure gives you more room. It means you can spread things out rather than trying to do everything in a tight window. You can explore one area in the morning, stop for lunch properly, and still have time for another part of the city in the afternoon, without the whole thing feeling rushed. It also makes independent travel less stressful. If you are using trains or metros, extra port time gives you margin. It gives you breathing space. Overnight ports are one of the biggest hidden advantages on this type of itinerary. Not because they sound good in theory, but because they let you do things that would not really make sense on a normal one-day stop. Rotterdam is the obvious example. If the ship stayed for just one standard port day, most people would feel they had to choose. Explore Rotterdam properly, or use the opportunity to go to Amsterdam. That is already quite a big decision, because both are valid. But with an overnight, the pressure comes off. You can use the first day for Amsterdam, then return to the ship without the usual panic about squeezing every last minute out of the stop. Then the following day, you can explore Rotterdam itself, or go somewhere nearby like Delft or The Hague. That changes the cruise from a simple stop into a mini 2-day city break. And that is a very different proposition. Weather is one of the most important parts of this type of cruise, and also one of the most misunderstood. People often frame it too simply, as if the question is just whether it will be cold or not. The reality is that weather affects much more than temperature. In winter, it can be properly cold. Hamburg in snow with minus temperatures feels very different to a mild city break. Wind off the water makes a difference. Standing around at transport stops feels different. Even simple things like taking photos or walking between sites can feel more tiring when conditions are colder than expected. Packing for a Northern Europe cruise is much more about function than image. And the mistake people make is packing for the idea of a cruise rather than the reality of the port days. What matters here is not whether you have enough dressy options for the ship. It is whether you can stay comfortable ashore for long enough to enjoy the day properly. Because if your hands are cold, your shoes are wrong, or you are dealing with wind and drizzle in the wrong coat, that starts affecting your decisions surprisingly quickly. Layers matter far more than one heavy item. Comfortable shoes matter more than anything that looks smart. Something waterproof matters even if rain is only forecast for part of the day. And on winter sailings, gloves and a proper coat are not optional extras. They directly affect how long you can comfortably stay out. One thing people often try to compare is cost, especially against Mediterranean cruises. But the reality is, it doesn't work in a straightforward way. In terms of day-to-day spending, things like coffee, lunch, or a quick drink in places like Hamburg or Rotterdam are broadly similar to what you'd expect in major Mediterranean cities. It doesn't feel dramatically different once you're actually there. Where the difference comes in is how you spend your day. On a Mediterranean cruise, it's quite common to rely on excursions, taxis, or longer transfers just to reach the places you want to visit, and that's where costs can add up quite quickly. In Northern Europe, because many ports are city-based with good transport, it's often much easier to do things independently. You can walk, use public transport, or keep your day simple without needing to spend as much on organized tours. So in practice, some people actually find Northern Europe cruises cheaper ashore, not because things cost less, but because you have more control over how you get around and what you choose to do. And that's the key difference. One final thing to understand is that the overall feel of a Northern Europe cruise can change depending on the line you book, even when the ports look similar. On MSC, for example, multiple embarkation ports make the cruise feel more European from the start. You may have passengers joining and leaving in places like Hamburg or Rotterdam, rather than everyone simply boarding in Southampton and staying on board for the full loop. It gives the itinerary a slightly different rhythm. The passenger mix can shift, the atmosphere can change through the cruise, and it feels a bit more like a wider European route than a closed UK sailing. On a line like P&O Cruises, the same general region can feel more familiar to a UK audience, especially with sailings built around Southampton and a more consistent start-to-finish passenger flow. Now you know how Northern Europe cruises work. Watch the full Northern Europe ports playlist on screen now.